Welcome back to the Counseling Beautiful Plus Biblical vlog. My name is Jess and I am your host. Today we'll be talking about my testimony. One of the reasons that I want to talk about my testimony today is because it's very important to know who I am, to know where I come from, and also to just know that my life has not been easy. Sometimes as Christians, we can be very big about hiding some of the stuff that we've gone through because we just feel ashamed. And I really want to be open with my followers or people who are trying to get into counseling. Something that is so important with your counselees is to talk about your testimony, to talk about who you are, what you've been through, what you are still struggling with sometimes. Sometimes it can be healthy to share, like, hey, I'm not perfect. I'm still walking or working through these things. Now, of course, we don't want to burden our counselees and share too much and, lean on them. This time is for them. But at the same time, it's just so vital for them to know us too. They need to know who they're listening to. And so I believe that during this vlog, it's really important for you to know who I am. So, I want to start off with a verse, and it's going to be Genesis 50, verse 20. And it says, "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people shall be kept alive as they are today." And I would say that my testimony could be broken down into three different parts. The first one being, they meant evil and harm against me. Two, God meant it for good. And three, that many people should be blessed or comforted or kept alive. So let's talk. So the first one is, they meant it for harm. My childhood could be summed up in one word, and that would be bliss. My parents never fought. I had a sister who I really loved. We went to church. Um, School was great. I excelled in soccer. I played sports. I was good at almost every sport that was thrown my way. Um, Pretty much, I was pretty sheltered. But when I was 8 years old, my parents told me and my sister that they were divorcing. We were in complete shock. We didn't even know what divorce was at this time, and but we just knew that it wasn't good. Soon after being divided into different households, there's just a lot of strain. My mom, she started dating soon after, and my first memory of knowing that things had changed for us was when she had a boyfriend and he was apparently married, and she found out that she was the other woman and she was livid. And so she took me and my sister up one night and drove up to his place, and she got out and she started screaming and throwing stuff. I just remember her throwing a rock at the window. She was just screaming at the top of her lungs, just going crazy. And I just remember holding my sister, and we're sitting in the car. My sister's crying, and I am just in absolute shock and just thinking, something's wrong, something's off. This is, my life has changed. I remember being very scared, very depressed, very angry, especially angry at my mother. And then after that, so they broke up, and then she started dating another guy. And pretty pretty quickly, I knew that this guy was not good. He made me feel very uncomfortable. He did not make me feel safe. He would say things that were very fake. He would say something in front of one person, and then he would change his statement later. And this was before they were married. And I just remember not liking him. And I just begged my mom, please don't be with this guy. Please don't be with this guy. But my mom felt that she loved him and she wanted to get married. And so she did. And probably about a month after they got married, he started physically abusing her. And I remember so many nights that they would just be fighting in the middle of the night. I would be holding my sister. There were so many times that I did not know what to do. I remember one time I came out and he had my mom on the couch and was strangling her. And I just remember grabbing something that was next to me. I didn't even know what it was, but I just grabbed something and I remember hitting him over the head with it. Ended up being an old telephone and knocking him out. And it felt like that became my life. I mean, waking up in the middle of the night to them screaming and fighting. My mom started being, emotionally abusive to me, saying things, putting me down all the time. He was always putting me down. He was always saying harsh and cruel things to us, and it was just so. It was really terrifying, to be honest. We didn't feel like we could talk to anyone about it. We did eventually tell my father, and he pretty much put a stop to the physical abuse. He said that he wasn't going to allow us to come over anymore, but that didn't stop the emotional abuse. Um, Another element was that he was black, which is not a problem, but to my mom's side of the family, it was really frowned upon at the time, and they were really unkind to us for a season. The time that my mom is in this new relationship with this guy, I started finding that food was very comforting to me. Because I gained weight, I started to get bullied. I got bullied in soccer. I ended up just quitting it. I started to suffer in school because my grades, I was so depressed and suicidal. I just remember being so distraught and feeling very alone and just confused. I didn't know how to process this. I didn't know what to do about, you know, things that he said to me, things that my mother would say to me. I felt partly to blame, mostly because I was very vocal as a child. And so if he would hit her, I would yell at him, like, don't hit my mom. And then he would yell at me. And then my mom would yell at me for getting involved and that I made the problem, but God meant it for good. Fast forward about 7 years, I was 15 years old and very bitter, depressed, lonely, and suicidal. On one day, I got kicked out of the house. It's kind of a long story, so I'm not going to go into it, but pretty much I was so hysterically upset. I was brokenhearted. I just, I've been through so much pain, and for years and years and years, it had just gotten worse and worse. And my dad just realized he needed to put me in counseling. So I started getting counseling, and she asked me pretty point blank up front what was my relationship with God like. And I grew up in church, so I'm a Christian, I'm good, things are fine, I love God, whatever. And she really challenged me on that. She challenged me that I didn't love God, that I didn't really trust Him because I was so bitter and so angry and just resentful and depressed. But then I got into a Sunday school group, and this older woman kind of took me under her wing. And her name was Janine, and she was just such a lovely woman. She ended up taking me to a conference in Pigeon Forge around the same time. And at this conference, this man talked about his daughter who had been killed in Columbine. Her name was Rachel Joy Scott. And I just remember hearing about her, about how she had actually gone through similar things. She'd gone through a divorce and been bullied at school and just had a lot of hurt, but yet she turned to God about it. She journaled all of her prayers and she wrote poems, and pretty much she just had such a deep relationship with God. And I think all my life I had just been told that I had to have I had to be good to be a Christian, not I had to have a relationship with God to be a Christian. At the same time, God was also really opening my eyes to that, even though my mom and my stepfather were sinning against me, that I was also a sinner, that I was an enemy of God, that I did not believe Him, that I was blaming Him for all of my problems. And at that conference, it just really opened my eyes that I did not have a relationship with God, that maybe I went to church, but that did not mean that I leaned on the Lord, that I loved Him, that I was repentant of my sin. And at that conference, I repented and I told God I wanted a relationship with Him. And then that many should be comforted and blessed. After I started growing in my walk with God, I started to not only love reading my Bible, but sharing it with other people. I discovered the story of Joseph, which is from the verse that I read earlier, and that he was 17 years old when the suffering and the loss started. But what God showed him was that he ordained it. He had given him a dream, that he had a purpose for him. And then later on, even though everything went wrong and got so out of control, and everything seemed to be destroyed, that God had actually sent him ahead to Egypt so that he could save many people, including his family. And I really do believe that God showed me that he wanted me to use my pain and my turmoil to help other people. I realized that one of my spiritual gifts is teaching knowledge and shepherding. And I just felt so much comfort from my relationship with God that I was always trying to talk to other people about it. I was always trying to help other people build a relationship with Him. And it just clicked that I should go into counseling. It gave me such a peace knowing that at the time it was meant to be, that God had ordained the suffering, that even though they meant harm and evil against me, even though people at school and my mother and my stepfather and my family hurt me, that ultimately God wanted to use it for good. He wanted me to go into counseling. He wanted me to have purpose and to encourage other people and to help strengthen them. Went to Troy University, and then I went to Southern Seminary in 2012 and graduated with a master's in biblical counseling in 2015. Since becoming a counselor, I have just learned so much just about how we should be building a relationship with our counselees, how we should be sharing our lives with them, but also that we have to have really good boundaries. But the counselees that I share my testimony with, it just really opens them up to me more. It makes them feel like they know me, that they're talking to someone that they know, and it makes them feel like they're able to be vulnerable too, that their suffering is, it's not different, or that they're not alone in it, that they have someone who's an advocate with what they're going through. And I love counseling. It is something that really encourages me. I just feel so revived by it. I love talking to people and getting to know them and going deeper with them. I've always been such a deep person, and actually maybe a little too deep. I get told a lot that I ask too many questions, and what better way to ask questions than to become a counselor? So I would encourage y'all to talk about your testimony, to practice it. It can be a little awkward. It can feel very weird to share your testimony, but at the same time, it's just so important. And it's important for you to know, if I'm going to be doing this vlog long term, of who I am, where I come from, my background, and that there is hope, that God means everything for a reason, that He intends to use our sufferings for His glory. And I really believe that He has used that in my sufferings. And I'm just really excited to walk alongside together and just to talk more. If you have any questions or concerns, you want to talk about something specific, I will attach my email below, and so that way you can get a hold of me. And thank you for watching and following along. I'm really excited to talk more about how I got into counseling, why I'm a counselor, and some of God's purpose in my counseling. But, I share my testimony not to defame anyone, not to put anyone down, but just to talk about what I've been through and how God has really redeemed and saved me, and how He cares for us.